So welcome everyone. We are so glad that you're here. Today's webinar is going to be the Blueprint to Intervention. So I hope that you came because you have students that are struggling and you want to do even more, even better in order to help them thrive as readers. Today you are with Meredyth and I. So this is Dr. Meredyth Kealey. She does so many things at MindPlay, but really what benefits you most is that she is the one in charge of the curriculum. So she stays up on the latest research and standards changing with states and does testing with students to make sure that everything we put together is the very best. She has experience in the community college space, teaching the developmental reading. She's taught reading certification courses to teachers, taught in the special education realm for many years, and is a wonderful person. So Meredyth, thank you for joining me today.
Very kind. This is Doreen, our Chief Pastoral Officer. She manages the team that delivers professional learning to our educators, and she also works with administrators on implementing MindPlay to have the greatest learning impact. She has her master's in adult education and training and has worked as a classroom teacher, as a seminar instructor, and has had many other roles in the education space. Doreen's passion for education shines through everything she does, and if you've ever been in a meeting with her, she always brings wisdom and warmth to every conversation.
Thank you. All right, let's dive on in. So that's a little bit about Meredyth and I, but we want to know who we're chatting with today. Both of us are informal. We want this to be a very practical webinar where you get concrete things you can do tomorrow. So if everyone wouldn't mind tossing into the chat, where are you from? What's your role? And you can type to just hosts and panelists if you want to, but I think it's more fun to chat to everybody. So feel free to put that in. Nice to see you there, Amy. Awesome. High school. All right, literacy advocate, Wyoming, lovely. Oh, Pennsylvania. We didn't say where we're from. I'm also in Pennsylvania. I'm your neighbor, Ashley. And Meredyth is in Arizona. 7th and 8th grade ELA. Snowy. Yep, snowy here as well. Probably not so much for you, Meredyth.
It's 70 here today.
Awesome. Porterville, California. I have been there. That's awesome. Australia, I love it. Okay, they're coming in fast now. Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much for being here. I also want you to think about what is it that you want to get out of today's webinar? Why did you show up? So if you want to think about that, and then also think about the students that you serve that are reading well below grade level, because that's really why we're here today. But Meredyth, what are you hoping that we learn?
So today we're going to review the key components of individualized instruction, just because they are important to intervention, obviously, and then hopefully understand the important role of phonemic awareness and phonics in students' reading development, as well as how to identify those students who may be struggling and what we can do to help them become successful readers.
Wonderful. So I promise this is not a depressing webinar, except maybe for this slide and maybe the next one too. So take a moment and read this to yourself. Does this ring true to you? Have you seen students that, especially those of you working with older students, where it's pulling teeth to get them to want to read? And just keep the chat coming throughout the whole webinar. We're going to keep chatting with you. Awesome. I'm still getting some of the why you're here. Perfect. All right. And then Meredyth, what does the research say?
So we know that children who fall behind in first grade have a 1 in 8 chance of ever catching up to grade level in reading. So this is why it's important to emphasize providing early intervention to students. Also, phonemic awareness is the best predictor of reading success. So again, focusing on teaching phonemic awareness as well as making sure we're helping all students who may be struggling is really important. And phonics, as we know, is the ability to decode words. But the end goal for all students is that they can comprehend what they read. That is the main reason why we need to do systematic phonics instruction, so that students can read and ultimately comprehend text. So we're going to start today with talking just a quick review on individualized instruction and the four main components of it. The first one being pacing. So we all know that students progress at their own speed. So we need to make sure we're matching the speed of students, obviously encouraging them to do the best they can as quickly as they can, but they're not all going to be at the same place. So we need to make sure that they are mastering simpler concepts before moving to the next, and whatever pace they do that is going to be the most beneficial for individual students. The next piece is content. So the learning materials we use need to be chosen based on the student's strengths and weaknesses as well as interests. So again, it needs to be individualized to each student's specific needs. Instructional methods should include strategies that will help the student learn best. So that could be maybe one-on-one teaching, small group teaching, adaptive technology, or providing instruction using multisensory activities. So we need to make sure that our methods are going to be optimal for each individual student's learning. And then lastly, assessment. We need to continuously progress monitor students, especially in intervention, because we need to make sure that they are actually making progress. If they're not, a good thing to do is to go back and evaluate how the pacing, content, and instructional methods are working. And we need to adjust and reteach. So we're going to start with phonological awareness, which is the ability to recognize and manipulate the sounds in spoken language. So why is it important? We touched on this a little bit already, but understanding phonemes is crucial for grasping the alphabetic principle, which is the understanding that there is a relationship between sounds and letters. Developing readers must also recognize the internal structure of words to benefit from reading instruction. So understanding that one phoneme can be represented by multiple graphemes, and that there's common patterns within words. There's a reciprocal relationship between letter sound knowledge and the ability to build words. So understanding the different sounds in words is going to help students be able to read and build words more complexly when they get into phonics. And the relationship between phonological awareness and reading success continues throughout schooling. So again, the main goal is to help all students become successful readers, and phonological awareness is the first step to that. So how do we know if our students are struggling with phonological awareness? First, they're going to have difficulty with rhyming. That's one of the first skills younger students learn with, poems and different songs they sing. So rhyming would be one indicator, if they're having difficulty doing that they're struggling with phonological awareness. Low RAND performance, which is going to measure their response time and retrieval, so their processing speed, will also be an indicator that students struggle with phonological awareness. Difficulty with the specific phonological tasks in tandem with low RAND performance is a pretty high indicator that a student may be struggling with phonological processing. So making sure we're constantly making sure that students have all the different skills that they need. And if they have this doubled difficulty and they're struggling, that's when we maybe need to take some further steps.
And Meredith, I know our younger age teachers, not that the teacher's young, but the teachers teaching younger students definitely know about RAN. I don't know that all high school educators know what that is.
Yeah, so RAN is a time test where students have to name as accurately and quickly as they can letters, numbers, or symbols, depending on the level of the student. And so they're timed on how many they get correct, and then it's an indicator of their phonological processing speed. So how quickly can they retrieve those letters or sounds? And that correlates really strongly with the ability to become a fluent reader.
Perfect. Yep. And some of you I know have MindPlay, and some of you have moved to the new version of it. So there is a RAN assessment that you can assign to students as needed.
Yeah, and RAN is definitely a great indicator. There is always, other factors you have to think about, like student attention and things like that. But yeah, it is great in MindPlay as well. So, and next we have trouble with phonics skills. So that's, you're going to notice that the student is having difficulty retaining and applying skills that you're teaching in class. So that may be an indicator that you need to step back and review phonological awareness with that student. And lastly, this one's the more obvious one. If they're having difficulty learning to read and spell, again, you might want to step back and look at their phonological awareness abilities. So we have our steps of difficulty here for phonological awareness, beginning with rhyming and alliteration all the way up to phonemic awareness. So just one clarification, phonological awareness is the umbrella term for all of these skills, and phonemic awareness falls under phonological awareness. They're often used interchangeably, but phonemic awareness is the best predictor for reading success, but includes manipulating phonemes by isolating, blending, segmenting, adding, or deleting them. So it's a subcategory of phonological awareness. So the two most important phonological abilities for reading and spelling are blending and segmenting. All of the skills are important to teach, obviously, but these would be the most related to learning to read. So when we're teaching sound blending, we want to begin with sustained speech sounds such as M and S. And what that means is that you continuously voice them. So you can keep saying forever if you want to, and the same with S. So we want to begin with sounds that we can really drag out with our voices, the sound of them. And then we would move on to stop sounds, which would be more like P or D. You can't continuously make that sound without taking a new breath. And we would progress from words with 2 speech sounds to 3 and then 4. So we're going to start simple and then make it more complex. And as always, we want to demonstrate and model and practice practice words with students. You do see here that we have a piece about phoneme, grapheme, correspondence, because even though phonological awareness is something that they say you can do in the dark, there's no letters connected to them. It is true that as we're teaching them letters, we're still doing blending and segmenting with the letters. And when we're doing that, we want to make sure that we're using regular phoneme grapheme patterns so that students can be successful when things get trickier. And Doreen is going to share some activities with us.
Yeah, so I just want to keep it very practical for you. So, just like what Meredith was saying with oral blending, you want to start with the ones that are continuous. So I would say am, and then they would have to put together Sam, and then I move into the stop sounds. So things like d, og, and then have students get better at putting all those together. I did student teaching in kindergarten, and so we did a whole bunch of stuff with movements. So a couple examples would be where they would need to step forward with each phoneme, or as students say the sounds, they can move and they jump when they finally blend the word together. So depending on what grade level you teach, I'm sure if you're in the lower grades, you're already getting them up and moving a lot. Another fun activity would be like a blending relay where you have one student say the first sound and then the next student say the next sound and then the final student is going to put it all together for you. And then you could have different races going at the same time. Older students, you don't want to do it in the dark, like Meredyth was just saying. You do want to start having some written text, but you may have letters with spaces in between so that they then have to practice that. And then, of course, you want that link between blending to segmenting. So Meredyth, will you tell us a little bit more about segmentation?
Yes. So when we're teaching segmentation, you would begin with the younger students with compound words, progressing to syllables, then onset and rhymes, and then phonemes. Phonemes is ultimately where we want them to be, but when we're introducing the skill, you can give them examples such as raincoat, separating those two words into rain and coat. So we're going to focus on the phonemes today. And again, at this level, we're going to start with 2 sounds, move to 3 and then 4, similar to blending. Most activities will include using manipulatives to push apart the sounds. This is going to be, it's fun for the kids. Doreen will have some activities to share with you. And when we're doing this with the older students, for sure, as you can see in this last piece here, breaking apart the phonemes and words with regular phoneme graphing correspondence. We want the students to be able to identify each individual sound, so they need to follow those basic phoneme graphing rules. There's always going to be exceptions, and those are things you talk about when they come along. But we want to start with words that will follow the rules.
Perfect. And the way that it looks in MindPlay is, I don't know if any of you have seen an activity like this. Go ahead and, yep. So the student is pushing up for each sound, and that's something that you can do if you have a system like MindPlay where they're doing it on the software. And the beauty there is that every child is getting feedback immediately on whether or not they're right. But if you don't have MindPlay, you can absolutely still do this where you have a piece of paper with boxes and you give them M&Ms and they're pushing one M&M into each box with each sound, and you do it until they eat all the M&Ms. Or we've got things like picture cards. So with this one, I would have them actually put their finger on the dot and do frog. And so it's fine that they can see what that is, because really what we're doing is practicing doing that blending there and segmenting. And then you can still do all the physical things too. So, have them clap or tap or stomp or whatever it is that it's going to get them moving around to help them practice with segmentation. And Meredyth, would you do the same thing with all grade levels?
Yeah, so for kinder and first grade, you would begin at the most basic level and teach all levels of phonological awareness. That's appropriate for their grade level, and the more they do it, the easier it's going to become for them as they move along. For older students, you really want to base any phonemic awareness instruction on assessment. It's not important that they get every single skill. If they're a 6th grader, the most important thing is that they can segment and blend and ultimately be able to decode. And we want to get them there as quickly as possible. So if you're doing an assessment and you realize that a student can't identify ending sounds, you would know, yeah, we need to go back and we need to work on that phonemic awareness skill with ending sounds. But ultimately, we want to get them to do the blending and segmenting with letters as quickly as possible. So now we are on to phonics, and I just wanted to point out one thing about I'm going back to match needs and instruction. The nice thing about MindPlay is that the students don't automatically get phonemic awareness lessons. So they'll be assigned certain phonics lessons, and then with the adaptability of it, it will identify if students do need that instruction. whereas the kinder students are going to get all of that as instruction. So I wanted to point that out. So now we are on to phonics, which is the relationship between the sounds and the phoneme, the graphemes and the sounds they represent. So why is this important? Ultimately, it helps readers connect letters to sounds, recognize spelling patterns, and apply this knowledge to reading. It's going to be the foundation for decoding words. So really, when the words are more simple, when they're younger, that may come easy to them. But if they don't get those phonic skills as they progress into multisyllabic words or larger words, they really need to have that knowledge to be able to decode those longer words. And it just empowers children to independently sound out and recognize words, which is going to lead to better overall literacy development. We wanted to touch upon the simple view of reading a little bit because our goal, obviously, is to get students to be successful readers and to understand what they're reading. And as we know, the simple view of reading depends on two factors. It is the multiplication sign in this equation reminds us that comprehension is the product of word recognition and language comprehension. So our focus today on phoneme awareness and phonics directly supports this word recognition component of the equation, which is ultimately going to help with reading comprehension. So the characteristics of students struggling with phonics, what are they? They'll have difficulty matching sounds to letters. They will often get stuck on words when they're reading. Their reading can be very slow and laborious and difficult for them. They may get frustrated. They will often guess at words, so they'll read a word that has the same beginning sound as the word that would make sense in the sentence. So they're just guessing because they don't have the decoding skills they need. And lastly, they're unable to recognize letter patterns when reading. So they're not making those connections to the different spelling patterns you've taught them in class. So.
All right, well, Meredith, this is too many words on one slide.
Yeah, this is a lot of words, but it is really important because we wanted to provide you with a systematic sequence for instruction. So some of you may already have a phonics program or you have something you use, but oftentimes in intervention, we'll figure out that a student needs help in one specific area. But then what do we do? So this slide provides you with the order of skills from simple to complex, and a little description about what they are. So, for example, if you are with your class and you're already working on R-controlled vowels, for example, but then you realize they're struggling with consonant blends, it kind of puts it in perspective where the gaps were for the student, and you can go back and reteach those skills. So we're going to send a nicer copy of this along to you later this week, but it's a really handy reference, I think.
And are there any of these? I want to pause for a moment. And as y'all are going through this, Meredith is a wealth of knowledge. So if there are any of these where you're like, all right, tell me a little bit more. I have a heck of a time trying to teach this particular skill. Please feel free to toss that into the chat. And even if we've moved on, we can circle back and help. I know I'm a part of a lot of groups where it's like, what they never taught me about the science of reading in college. And some of these can be really challenging to teach. So feel free to ask Meredith along the way.
Thank you. And so Doreen is going to share some phonics activity ideas with you.
Yep. So word sorts are a really fun one. So if you have words with ending in C and C, sorry, in K and CK, you can then have students sort them. And in my classroom, like to come up with some tricky ones where there would then be an argument about where something belonged. So That's not a great example because it's very obvious, but I would use these group activities of word sorts to be able to make it so students had to defend their arguments and talk about why they think something fits in a particular area. Moving on to spelling rules, you've got a lot of games you can play there. So one example would be a spelling word race, spelling rules race. So give your kiddos a rule like I before E except after C, and then you can have them have a list of words there as well, and then have them race to sort which ones follow this rule and which ones do not. And that I found opened up a lot of really good conversations in the class because here they're trying so hard to learn the rules you're teaching, and then we all know English is not the most fun language to learn because it doesn't always follow its own rules. So that's a way to, especially for students working below grade level, feel comfortable that, yeah, it's okay if some of this is hard and hear you talk through how you figure it out and how you remember. Another really fun one is the rule detective. So if you give students a list of words, so one example would be past tense having ed or the double consonant, and have them try to figure out. So they have a list and they work together and say, okay, I think the rule might be it usually ends like this, and then again justify their arguments. That speaking about why they think it works the way that it works really helps bring their understanding to that surface level, and helps you assess the students and say, oh, okay, I think Meredyth is struggling in this area, or that's what her misconception is. So all those can be very powerful. You see on the slide that is hyperlinked, and I know you can't actually click on it, but I promise we will send this whole deck and then some really good resources that Meredyth put together for us. But making words activity, there are so many variations of how you can do this, but you can have letter tiles and you can have them move them around. So we're gonna take the T off and we're gonna add a W. Now what's happening here? We're gonna take this letter and move it to the end. So that physical movement of things is really a powerful way to do it. And the students think it's a game. They think all of that is very fun. And then you can truly do a game. So you can do like Go Fish, Bingo, Memory, all those games that you already have with the phonics twist works well. But let's take a peek and see how MindPlay does this one.
Build, crunch. Crunch. You did it. Nudge. Spectacular.
Spectacular. So you notice that on the card, it doesn't have to be just one letter. It can be that combination. So whatever that skill is that you're working on, you can put them on MindPlay, where each of them will be doing exactly the skill that the system has assessed that they need and get that immediate feedback. Or this is just like those cards that we all write and have at the back table to physically move the cards. So whether it's online or not, it's the same basic concept.
So another strategy that will help in terms of what to assign your students in intervention to help if they're struggling is error analysis. So the best way is to do this with your students and discuss it, obviously, after you've figured out, what the errors are. But we want to really look at the work that they do and use those insights to help the student. So oftentimes you can get a lot of great information. If you look at this example here, you can see that there's some issues with some vowels, and identifying those specific errors for that student will guide your intervention. There's also a spelling skills error analysis sheet you can use for the student. That way, if you have a lot of words or you're looking at work for a few weeks, if you're documenting that, you can see where those consistent error patterns are. And so this is just a really great way to provide that targeted instruction to students. It can take a lot of time and effort, but in the end, it's worth it because you've pinpointed exactly where the student is struggling, and that intervention will, help the student much quicker in the end.
Yep. Yeah, time is the hard part there. I know. Where I've seen this, where you make time is sometimes in PLCs, where grade level teams will all come together and do some error analysis all in the same room. It is so powerful to see exactly where the errors are, and yet it's true. Time really is such a challenge. Let's take a peek at the next one, Meredith.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, so this is an example of feedback in MindPlay when a student is struggling. So listen for, does she just say like, wrong answer, or something a little bit deeper?
Thank. Listen for the first sound in the blend. Thank. Spell the consonant blend ng with 2 letters, N, K. Thank. Way to go!
So I know I personally, as a mom, I don't want my kids on devices all the time. And yet I think about when are the appropriate moments for technology to be doing a really good job, doing something that, I as one mom or a teacher of 32 kids can't be doing all at the same time. And that's where the feedback comes in. So the system is analyzing the errors immediately in real time, figuring out what feedback that student needs, and then teaching them based on what those misconceptions are. And then I love error analysis, so I'm going to show you how you could do it in our system if you find that magical time that none of us have enough of. So y'all able to see okay? Awesome. And I'm going to open the chat too, that way I can keep talking with you. So here I am in our educator dashboard, and if I wanted to see what errors somebody had, here I've got my list of kiddos, so I'm going to hop right in here and take a peek at Holly. Holly is an 8th grade student, and this here is her foundational skills profile. So you've got the key areas that we're measuring for this grade level. To orient you to this chart, the green line there is the grade level goal. So I can see that she is rocking and rolling with comprehension, with spelling, and with vocabulary, and then is getting closer on fluency, and is going to be working a lot with her on-screen coaches for phonics and for grammar. So in phonics, it's all taught in MindPlay by certified speech language pathologists. So then if I want to learn a little bit more, so I'm going to click in here to the phonics spoke, and I can see progress over time if there has been some. And then here I have the list of lessons. So this alone, even without clicking into errors or anything else, this is going to give me information about Holly. I see which concepts the system assessed and said, hey, she needs instruction in those. So let's take a peek here. So NG and NK, I can click on her errors. So she made 25 errors in the program so far related to those. So here, I hope y'all can see well enough. I can zoom in a little bit for you too. So on October 21st and 28th, it looks like this is kind of when she was hitting it in the software. I can see what the expected response was. So that was the right answer. And then I've got what response she gave. So let's practice a little bit of error analysis together. What do you all notice about the errors that she's making? Is she struggling with the NG or the NK like we just saw in the model, or is there something else going on here? Angela says it's actually the vowels that she's struggling with. And because you gave the right answer, maybe no one else will type either. Yeah, absolutely. So the system is saying, okay, yes, she is making mistakes, but then it's going to recognize that that is the challenge that she's having. And then let's see if it lets me zoom back out. And you can even download it to CSV if you wanted to get super fancy. Then here in her list of curriculum that she was assigned, the double asterisk means that there's a remedial lesson that was inserted. So in this case, it's the A versus I. So it identified she was struggling with those vowels and then taught her the content that she needed to catch her up, make sure she understood. One other piece that I like to highlight is, I'm going to zoom back out here, to save time, because here I just told you this big part about where if you had extra time, you could spend it. We also have the recommendations. So if you are a partner of MindPlay that has our reading studio, here you can go into recommendations. These are right there for every teacher. And this knows what students are working on and then what would be powerful for you as the educator to do. So in this case, I can see that Anthony just recently completed this lesson, so the AL, ALK, OT lesson. And so if I wanted to, I can just click this button here and it's going to automatically assign a decodable book that reinforces that exact thing that Anthony just completed. And that's really, I think, part of what makes the progress happen so fast for students is that we assess and figure out exactly what it is that they need. We teach them that with really solid feedback, and then they get to immediately reinforce that in real books. The other piece here in recommendations is that you've got the instructional support. So this is telling you, hey, Julian's struggling in K and CK. And so the system is going to remediate, it's going to keep teaching. It doesn't just teach C and CK one way, it teaches it up to 15 different ways for students depending on how they're struggling. But at any time, if you wanted to, you could just download this supplemental support sheet, which is your teacher lesson plan. It's the parts the kiddos would fill in themselves. It's different per grade level. So we've got grade bands for lower elementary, upper, and secondary, and then assessments too, so that it's really easy for you to identify where students are struggling. Where can we see their progress with the decodable book? So we saw that in the chat there. So if we hop back into Holly, oh, she's reading about vaccines right now. So you can see if that's what they're working on right now, you can see what books that they are reading there. And then another way you could do it, we have a new piece here called custom reports. Custom reports tell you kind of where in the curriculum they are. And then you can chat with them as well. All right, excellent question. All right, happy to answer other questions, but as we are getting toward the end of our time together today, when we were planning this, Meredyth and I had a lot of talks about, okay, how spread out do we go versus how deep in just a couple topics. So we decided, as you noticed, to focus in on phonemic awareness and phonics. If it would be helpful for you to have a deep dive on how to teach vocabulary when they're struggling, or how to teach older students that are struggling with comprehension. So any of these skills or anything else that is challenging for your readers, go ahead and private chat that to us, or put it in the main chat here, because we love doing these webinars. We're happy to help our educator friends. All right, that's that there. Last thing to share with you is, I don't know if y'all know, but MindPlay also now has a podcast called The Literacy Mindset. So we'll go ahead and put in the chat for you the URL. So it's just mindplay.com/podcast. But it is really so much fun to listen to administrators and educators talking about how they're improving literacy in their district. So I recommend you check that out if you are interested. Thank you, Tiana, for putting that in. And I think that about wraps up the webinar. Anything I'm forgetting, Meredyth?
I don't think so, no. No,
All right.
yeah, if you have any questions or want more information on anything specific that we talked about, just reach out to us. We know that there's so much more we could talk for 5 hours on, or I could talk for 5 hours on phonics. So happy to help if there's anything you need or have any questions about how MindPlay helps students.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your time today and for all you're doing for your students.